We live in a civilization that worships speed, faster decisions, faster growth, faster reactions, faster judgments. Speed is no longer a tool, it has become a moral value. To be fast is to be competent. To hesitate is to be weak. In such a world, wisdom feels like resistance, and resistance feels like pain. Wisdom is slow by nature. It asks questions before offering answers. It demands context before conclusions. It insists on looking backward and forward at the same time. This slowness creates friction with a culture that rewards immediacy, and that friction is experienced as discomfort, isolation, and sometimes quiet despair. The more clearly one understands the machinery of the modern world, the harder it becomes to move in rhythm with it. What once felt like insight now feels like burden. In earlier centuries, wisdom often brought status. Elders were valued because experience accumulated slowly. Knowledge was scarce, and those who possessed it had leverage. Today, information is abundant, and speed determines survival. Algorithms do not wait for reflection. Markets do not reward patience. Political cycles punish nuance. In this environment, wisdom does not disappear, but it loses its visibility. The person who pauses to think is overtaken by the one who acts without understanding. The one who asks whether something should be done is drowned out by those asking how fast it can be done. The pain of wisdom emerges when understanding reality no longer aligns with participating in it. Those who see long-term patterns cannot fully belong to short-term systems. When you recognize how ecological damage accumulates invisibly, daily consumption feels like complicity. When you understand how attention is engineered, casual scrolling feels like surrender. When you see how narratives are manufactured, emotional certainty becomes suspicious. Knowledge sharpens perception, and sharper perception cuts comfort. The wiser the mind, the less easily it is satisfied by simple stories. And a society built on simple stories has little tolerance for those who complicate them. The acceleration of the world creates a strange paradox. We have more data than ever, yet less time to process it. More opinions, yet less understanding. More connectivity, yet less coherence. Wisdom requires synthesis, but synthesis requires time, and time is the one resource modern systems refuse to provide. As a result, wisdom becomes painful not because it is wrong, but because it is misaligned with the dominant tempo of life. It feels like trying to breathe deeply in a room where everyone is running. This pain often leads to withdrawal, not dramatic retreat, but subtle disengagement. The wise speak less, not because they lack words, but because words are cheap in an economy of noise. They choose silence not out of arrogance, but out of precision. Every statement risks being flattened, misinterpreted, or weaponized. When speed replaces depth, meaning collapses into slogans. In such conditions, wisdom becomes careful, and careful voices are easily overlooked. At the same time, knowledge no longer guarantees power. For most of history, those who understood the world best could shape it. Today, power flows through attention rather than understanding. The ability to capture, hold, and monetize attention matters more than the ability to explain reality accurately. A simplified lie travels faster than a complex truth. An emotional trigger outperforms a reasoned argument. In this economy, influence is measured not by insight, but by engagement. This shift changes the role of intelligence in society. Knowing how something works is less valuable than knowing how to make people look at it. Expertise competes with performance, and performance usually wins. The result is a strange inversion. Those who know the least speak with the most certainty, while those who know the most speak with caution. Confidence becomes detached from competence. Visibility becomes detached from value. Attention is finite, and modern systems are designed to extract it aggressively. Every notification, headline, and outrage competes for a slice of human awareness. In this environment, wisdom struggles because it does not shout. It does not provoke instant emotion. It asks for sustained focus, and sustained focus is now a luxury, the wise are not invisible because they hide, but because the spotlight has moved elsewhere. It shines on those who entertain, polarize, or simplify, not on those who explain. This creates a new kind of inequality, not of wealth or information, but of perception. Those who understand the mechanics of attention protect themselves from it. They consume less, react less, and speak less. Ironically, this self-protection reduces their visibility even further. Meanwhile, those who surrender to the attention economy become its most prominent figures, regardless of the quality of their thinking. Power migrates away from understanding and toward amplification. The painful realization for the wise is not merely that they are unheard, but that being heard often requires compromising truth. To gain attention, one must simplify beyond accuracy, dramatize beyond honesty, and polarize beyond usefulness. Refusing to do this is a moral choice, but it comes at the cost of relevance in the short term. The wise accept this cost because they understand that attention gained through distortion eventually destroys credibility. And credibility, once lost, cannot be regained through volume. In such a world, invisibility becomes a form of integrity. It is a way of refusing to trade depth for reach. It is a recognition that not all silence is absence, and not all visibility is presence. Wisdom survives by adapting its strategy, not by abandoning its principles. It waits rather than competes. It observes rather than performs. It invests in long-term understanding rather than immediate influence. The pain, then, is not a sign of failure. It is a signal of misalignment between human cognition and industrial tempo. Wisdom evolved in small communities where time allowed reflection and social bonds rewarded insight. The modern world operates at a scale and speed that overwhelm those ancient capacities. Feeling out of place is not weakness, it is evidence of awareness. Those who endure this pain without numbing themselves are not obsolete. They are ahead of their time. They are conserving the cognitive resources that future crises will demand. When systems built on speed begin to fracture, when attention collapses under its own excess, when simplistic narratives fail to explain complex realities, clarity will once again become valuable. Until then, wisdom remains quiet, patient, and largely unseen, carrying its pain not as a burden, but the cost of seeing clearly. Those who see consequences early rarely feel joy in the present. They feel tension. They feel the weight of futures that have not yet arrived, but are already inevitable. To understand a system deeply is to recognize that every action carries delayed costs, and that most of those costs will be paid by people who never consented to the decision. This awareness does not produce applause. It produces discomfort. When others celebrate growth, the wise calculate collapse. When others praise innovation, the wise ask who will be excluded, controlled, or erased by it. This is why clarity often feels like loneliness. It separates you from the collective excitement of the moment. You cannot fully participate in enthusiasm when you see where it leads. Modern societies celebrate optimism, but they punish foresight. Foresight interrupts momentum. It questions direction. It introduces hesitation where speed is worshipped. The person who says slow down is rarely thanked because slowing down feels like loss. Yet history repeatedly shows that disasters are rarely caused by lack of intelligence. They are caused by ignored intelligence. The warnings were almost always present. The problem was not that no one knew, but that those who knew were inconvenient. Wisdom threatens comfort. It destabilizes confidence. It asks people to trade short-term pleasure for long-term survival, and that is a trade most systems are designed to resist. To see consequences early is also to experience moral strain. You realize that neutrality is an illusion. Every decision you ignore is still a decision that shapes outcomes. Silence becomes ethically complex. Speaking up can isolate you. Staying quiet can implicate you. This is the quiet suffering of understanding. It is easier to react emotionally than to respond responsibly. Emotion gives immediate release. Responsibility offers none. Responsibility only offers delayed justification, often long after damage has been done. That is why foresight feels thankless. The best outcome of wisdom is that nothing dramatic happens, and nothing dramatic is ever celebrated. As complexity increases, understanding becomes rarer, and misunderstanding becomes louder. Modern systems are too intricate to be grasped through slogans. Economies, technologies, and political structures now operate on scales that exceed human intuition. Yet public discourse has moved in the opposite direction. It has become shorter, faster, and simpler. Complex truths do not survive in environments designed for instant consumption. They are edited, flattened, and transformed into entertainment. What cannot be compressed into a headline is ignored. What cannot be explained in seconds is dismissed. This is not accidental. Systems that thrive on speed cannot afford deep understanding, because deep understanding reveals structural weaknesses. Noise has become a feature, not a flaw. It keeps people occupied while decisions are made elsewhere. When attention is fragmented, power concentrates quietly. The constant flood of information creates the illusion of transparency while producing confusion. People feel informed without being knowledgeable. They react without understanding. In such an environment, wisdom is not merely unrewarded, it is actively sidelined. Those who insist on nuance are seen as obstacles. Those who ask uncomfortable questions are framed as negative, uncooperative, or detached from reality. Understanding how systems work often means recognizing how little control individuals actually have. This realization is destabilizing. It contradicts popular narratives of freedom, choice, and empowerment. It suggests that many decisions attributed to personal will are in fact shaped by algorithms, incentives, and inherited structures. Such insights do not make for motivating speeches or viral content. They make people uneasy. And unease does not spread well. Certainty spreads. Anger spreads. Simplicity, yes, spreads. Wisdom, which often ends in "it depends," struggles to compete. The modern world rewards those who perform confidence, not those who possess understanding. Confidence is visible. Understanding is quiet. Confidence demands immediate action. Understanding demands patience. In public arenas driven by competition for attention, patience looks like indecision. Silence looks like irrelevance. The loud voice is mistaken for the strong one. The fast response is mistaken for intelligence. Over time, this creates a distorted ecosystem where ideas are selected not for accuracy but for emotional impact. This distortion has consequences. When systems reward noise, they gradually exclude those capable of seeing long-term risks. The people most qualified to warn are the least likely to be heard. They speak cautiously because they know how much they do not know. Meanwhile, those with shallow understanding speak boldly because they see no complexity to restrain them. The result is not just misinformation, but overconfidence at scale. And overconfidence, when combined with power, is one of the most dangerous forces in history. The wise often withdraw not out of arrogance, but out of realism. They recognize that participation in certain conversations requires sacrificing accuracy for popularity. They understand that truth spoken in the wrong environment becomes ineffective, or worse, counterproductive. When a system cannot absorb complexity, adding more truth does not enlighten it. It overloads it. Withdrawal then becomes a form of integrity. It is a refusal to simplify what should not be simplified. It is a decision to preserve clarity rather than dilute it for approval. This withdrawal, however, comes at a cost. Visibility grants influence and invisibility limits it. When those who understand step back, space opens for those who do not. Over time, decisions drift further away from reality. Policies are shaped by narratives rather than evidence. Technologies are deployed without ethical frameworks. Progress continues, but without direction. Speed increases, but wisdom does not keep pace. The gap between what is possible and what is responsible widens. Yet, even in invisibility, wisdom continues to operate. It survives in research, in long-term planning, in quiet institutions that resist spectacle. It shapes future generations more than present trends. The most important ideas often enter society indirectly, through systems and structures rather than speeches and slogans. They influence how problems are framed, how data is interpreted, how limits are acknowledged. This influence is slow, and it rarely feels powerful in the moment. But it is durable. When noise dominates, the temptation is to become louder. But wisdom rarely wins by shouting. It wins by endurance, by remaining intact while cycles of excitement and outrage burn themselves out, by preserving memory in cultures obsessed with novelty, by maintaining context in environments addicted to idiocy. The wise may become invisible, but invisibility can be a position of observation, and observation over time becomes understanding. Silence is misunderstood because modern culture has lost the ability to distinguish between absence and restraint. We assume that if something is not constantly expressed, it does not exist. If an idea is not shared, it is assumed to be weak. If a person is quiet, they are considered irrelevant. This assumption is new. For most of human history, silence was not emptiness, it was authority. Elders spoke rarely. Knowledge was compressed, not broadcast. Words carried weight because they were scarce. Today, words are infinite and therefore almost weightless. The systems that shape our lives, markets, media, politics, and technology, are no longer designed to reward understanding. They reward visibility. Visibility requires constant output. Constant output requires speed. Speed eliminates reflection. Reflection produces doubt. Doubt slows action, and slow action is punished. In such an environment, silence appears suicidal. But that is an illusion created by a system that confuses activity with intelligence. Silence is not the absence of thought. It is the result of too much thought. It is what happens when someone understands that every statement strengthens one narrative and weakens another, that every public opinion becomes data, and that every reaction feeds a machine designed to monetize emotion rather than truth. Those who see this clearly do not rush to participate. They become selective. They conserve their attention the way earlier societies conserved food during famine. Strategic silence is not about hiding from reality. It is about refusing to be shaped by it in predictable ways. When outrage becomes a commodity, the most radical act is not to contribute more outrage. When opinion becomes currency, the most intelligent choice is not always to spend it. Silence breaks the cycle. It denies the system what it feeds on most: immediate emotional response. Invisibility, in this context, is not social failure. It is adaptive behavior. Throughout evolution, the organisms that survived were not always the strongest or the fastest, but the ones that wasted the least energy. Modern society is an attention ecosystem. It rewards those who burn attention quickly and punishes those who conserve it. The wise notice this imbalance early. They understand that attention, not information, is the rarest resource of the 21st century. Every alert, every headline, every argument demands a piece of your cognitive energy. Most of these demands are not urgent, and many are not real. They are designed to create a sense of permanent crisis, because crisis keeps people engaged, reactive, and predictable. The wise feel this pressure more acutely than others, not because they are weaker, but because they see the cost. They feel the cognitive fatigue accumulating, the erosion of depth, the gradual replacement of thinking with reacting. That awareness is painful. It creates distance between the wise and the crowd. While others feel energized by constant stimulation, the wise feel drained. While others confuse being informed with being wise, the wise understand that information without context is noise. This realization makes participation exhausting, so they withdraw, not completely but intentionally. Withdrawal is not escape, it is recalibration. By stepping back, the wise regain control over their internal landscape. They rebuild long attention spans in a world optimized for interruption. They train themselves to tolerate boredom again, knowing that boredom is the gateway to original thought. They read slowly, they think historically, they ask questions that do not trend well but matter deeply. In doing so, they protect something fragile and increasingly rare: the ability to think independently. Independence of thought is dangerous to systems built on prediction. Predictable humans are easy to govern, easy to market to, easy to mobilize. Unpredictable humans, those who pause, reflect, and refuse to react on command, introduce friction. They cannot be easily categorized. Their silence disrupts algorithms trained on constant feedback. Their invisibility is not accidental, it is structural resistance. This is why focus has quietly become an act of rebellion. To focus deeply on one idea, one problem, one question, is to reject thousands of competing demands. It is to say that not everything deserves equal attention. This hierarchy of importance is intolerable to systems that profit from flattening all content into the same emotional urgency. Focus restores meaning by reintroducing limits. The wise understand that clarity does not come from consuming more, but from excluding more. They are not trying to know everything, they are trying to understand something well. This approach looks inefficient in a culture obsessed with speed and scale. But understanding has never been scalable. It has always been slow, personal, and uncomfortable. Discomfort is the price of insight. To see the long-term consequences of short-term actions is to live with constant tension. To understand how easily fear can be manufactured is to feel uneasy in moments of collective certainty. To recognize the fragility of truth in an age of narratives is to carry doubt where others carry confidence. That emotional burden pushes the wise towards silence, not because they lack courage, but because they refuse to simplify what they know into slogans. Invisibility becomes a shelter. In that shelter, ideas can mature without being distorted by immediate reaction. Perspectives can evolve without being forced into fixed positions. The wise know that once an idea is publicly declared, it becomes part of a tribe, a side, a battlefield. Silence allows thought to remain fluid. It keeps curiosity alive. This does not mean the wise abandon society. They re-enter selectively. They choose moments carefully, aware that timing matters more than volume. When they speak, they aim not to dominate the conversation, but to change its direction. When they act, they do so quietly, knowing that sustainable change rarely announces itself loudly. The tragedy of the modern world is not that wisdom has disappeared, but that it has become difficult to recognize. We look for intelligence in confidence, for leadership in charisma, for truth in popularity. Meanwhile, wisdom often sits unnoticed, conserving energy, watching patterns repeat, waiting for moments when depth is once again valued over speed. In such moments, often during crisis, visibility shifts. The noise collapses under its own weight. Fast answers fail, simple stories break, and suddenly, the quiet thinkers are asked to speak. They are not prepared because they chased attention, but because they avoided it. Their invisibility allowed them to see clearly when others were busy performing. This is the paradox of our time. The more chaotic the world becomes, the more essential invisible wisdom is. Not wisdom that entertains, but wisdom that stabilizes. Not wisdom that goes viral, but wisdom that endures. And those who carry it must accept a difficult truth, that understanding deeply may cost them recognition now. but it preserves relevance when it matters most.
AIs will write books like Sapiens and Nexus so much better than me that it will be kind of almost meaningless for a human being to engage in that. The amount of information that I can gather is infinitesimal compared to the AI. Yeah. I've already seen, these wonderful stories written by AI, and I agree that humans will always want to create for the joy of creating, as children do. But would it still be valued? Until today, it's not just that we liked doing it, it was extremely valuable. Nothing on planet Earth could be as creative as us. And now in more and more fields, there is something